In 1952, nurses at a Schenectady orphanage discovered a 6-month-old baby in such horrific condition that most believed he was beyond saving. One nurse refused to give up on him. Her love and dedication should have been enough to heal the trauma. But sometimes, even the most well-intentioned rescue can't rewrite a story that's already written in pain. The year was 1952 in Schenectady, New York, when staff at a local orphanage opened their doors to find someone had left them a baby, 6 months old. This wasn't unusual for the time. What was unusual was the condition this child was in. Paul Zeininger was the fourth of 5 children born into the Zeininger household, and like his siblings, he'd ended up in state care. But Paul's situation was different. This baby had been through something that left even experienced medical professionals shaken. When Paul arrived at the orphanage, he could barely speak. His developmental delays were severe. He'd created a survival mechanism that horrified the staff. Accustomed to long periods without food, he'd begun eating his own feces to survive. The doctors and nurses were unanimous in their assessment. This child needed specialized care that the average foster family could not provide. The medical team recommended Paul remain in institutional care indefinitely. They believed his trauma was too intensive. His needs were too complex for traditional adoption. But one person refused to accept that recommendation. Norma Stano was a nurse, and she saw something in this malnourished, traumatized baby that others couldn't. Together with her husband Eugene, she spent 6 months fighting the system for the right to adopt Paul and raise him as their own child. The battle was fierce. Medical professionals argued against the placement, concerned that even Norma's nursing background wouldn't be sufficient for Paul's extensive needs. But the Stanos persisted, and eventually they won. Reluctantly, the orphanage staff placed Paul in Norma and Eugene's care. They changed his name to Gerald Stano, hoping to distance him from this traumatic past, give him a fresh start with a loving family. By every measure that mattered, Norma and Eugene were exemplary parents. They provided Gerald with stability, consistent meals, medical care, and genuine affection. They created the kind of home environment that should have been transformative for a child who'd only known neglect and abuse. But Gerald's past had left marks that love alone couldn't erase. Despite his parents' effort, he continued struggling to catch up with his peers developmentally and socially. At 10 years old, Gerald was still wetting the bed regularly. His classmates were merciless. Boys would physically assault him, while girls would mock him and call him names. Gerald later claimed this pattern of humiliation and rejection by women continued well into his adulthood, describing incidents where women would insult him, pull his hair, and even throw beer bottles at him. Academically, Gerald remained behind his age group. His grades never rose above C's and D's in most subjects. He showed aptitude in only 2 areas, music and track and field. But even his success in track came with a troubling revelation. Eugene discovered that Gerald had been stealing money from his wallet repeatedly, using cash to bribe the other students to let him win races. This behavior revealed something concerning about Gerald's relationship with achievement and honesty. As Gerald entered adolescence, his behavioral problems intensified rather than improved. At 14, while still enduring bullying from classmates, he began expressing his frustrations in increasingly destructive ways. His first arrest came for setting off a false fire alarm. The second followed shortly after, when police caught him throwing rocks at passing cars from a highway bridge. These weren't what you would call typical teenage pranks. They demonstrated a concerning pattern of behavior that seemed to escalate with each incident. Gerald's academic struggles continued, and he didn't graduate high school until age 21. Through Norma's connections, he secured a job at a local hospital, but his employment was short-lived. Colleagues discovered he'd been stealing from them, and Gerald was terminated. Hoping a change of environment might help their son, the Stanos relocated to Florida. Unfortunately, Gerald's pattern of job loss continued. Whether due to theft, chronic tardiness, or other workplace issues, he couldn't maintain steady employment. Then, Gerald crossed a line from which there is no return. He was caught sexually assaulting a mentally disabled young woman who lacked the capacity to consent. The situation became more complicated when the victim discovered she was pregnant. Once again, Norma and Eugene stepped in to help their son. They paid for the woman's medical expenses, including an abortion, effectively shielding Gerald from the full consequences of his actions. This intervention taught Gerald a lesson that would prove catastrophic, that his actions didn't necessarily have consequences, especially when his parents were willing to protect him from them. Years would pass before the full scope of what Gerald had learned from that lesson became clear. In spring 1980, a woman named Donna Hensley walked into a Florida police station, barely alive and clearly traumatized. Donna worked as a sex worker, and she'd agreed to accompany a client to a hotel room about a week earlier. What should have been a straightforward transaction turned into a near-death experience. According to Donna's statement to police, an argument erupted over her services. When she attempted to leave, the man attacked her with brutal violence, stabbing her 30 times before screaming an insult and fleeing the scene. Donna's survival was nothing short of miraculous. Despite her injuries, she managed to make her way to the authorities and provide them with crucial information: the attacker's license plate number, a description of his vehicle, and most importantly, his name, Gerald Stano. Police soon discovered that Gerald was well known among local sex workers, though none had previously reported him for violence or mistreatment. With Donna's evidence, however, authorities had enough to arrest Gerald for attempted murder. While he sat in jail awaiting trial, 2 college students made a grim discovery near Daytona Beach Boardwalk. They found the decomposing remains of 20-year-old Mary Carol Mayer, who had been stabbed multiple times in her back, legs, and chest. Given that police had a suspect in custody for a nearly identical stabbing attack on another woman, investigators approached Gerald about Mary's murder. Initially, of course, he denied involvement, admitting that he'd only seen Mary before. Then something broke inside Gerald. He confessed to killing Mary and provided investigators with detailed information about how he'd committed the murder. He even led them to where he left her body, confirming details that only the killer would know. Mary Mayer's murder confession opened the floodgates. Gerald admitted to killing woman after woman throughout Florida. Initially, he claimed his killing spree began in the 1970s when he was in his early 20s. Later, he revised this timeline, actually admitting that he started murdering women in the 1960s when he was 18 years old. Gerald's final confession count reached 41 murders. Investigators could definitively connect him with 23 of those cases, though they believed the actual number of his victims could be as high as 88 women. The scope of Gerald's crimes was staggering. One victim remained unidentified for 43 years until genetic genealogy revealed later her identity in 2024, demonstrating the lasting impact of his violence on families and communities. For 6 years following his initial confession, Gerald continued working with investigators, leading them across Florida to locations where he'd attacked and disposed of his victims. Detective Paul Crow, who headed the investigation, observed Gerald's behavior throughout this process. According to Detective Crow, Gerald showed emotion only once during their extensive travels to the crime scenes. This occurred when they visited the location of his final victim, where Gerald wept. However, Crow believed Gerald's tears were for himself, mourning his lost freedom rather than expressing genuine remorse for his actions. At trial, Gerald was convicted of 9 murders and received 3 death sentences. His case moved through the appeals process for years before reaching its conclusion in spring 1998, when he was scheduled for execution by electric chair. In his final moments, Gerald attempted to recant all his previous confessions. "I am innocent," he declared. "I am frightened. I was threatened, and I was held month after month without any real legal representation. I confessed to crimes I did not commit." He specifically blamed Detective Paul Crow for coercing false confessions from him. However, many people, including family members of 2 victims who witnessed his execution, believed the state was executing the right man. Gerald Stano's case raises profound questions about the nature of trauma, intervention, and redemption. Here was a child who experienced unthinkable abuse, was rescued by loving parents, and received care that should have been transformative. Norma and Eugene Stano did everything society tells us should work. They provided stability, love, medical care, and endless second chances. They fought systems and spent their resources trying to help their son become a productive member of society. Yet, their love and dedication couldn't overcome the damage that had been done in Gerald's first 6 months of life, nor could it prevent him from learning that actions might not always have consequences if the right people were willing to shield them from it. Gerald's story doesn't diminish the importance of intervention and support for traumatized children. Instead, it illuminates the complex realities of severe early trauma and the limitations of even the most well-intentioned efforts to heal it. The women Gerald killed deserved better than to become casualties in a story that began with one baby's abandonment in 1952. Their lives had value that extended far beyond their role in Gerald's narrative, and their families continued to live with the consequences of his choices decades later. Some stories don't have redemptive endings, no matter how much love and effort goes into trying to create them. Gerald Stano's life serves as both a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in people like Norma and Eugene, and a sobering reminder that some damage runs too deep for any intervention to fully repair. Thanks for listening to 10 Minute Murder, bingeable true crime stories. My name is Joe. Hi, I'm the host, and I appreciate you listening today. If you're a new listener to the podcast, subscribe where you're listening right now. You can also go to 10minutemurder.com, catch up on everything there is to know about the podcast, and also send me an email if you'd like to. Speaking of, here is one of those emails. Subject, Dexter is back. Thoughts? Hey Joe, I know you've mentioned before that you're a fan of Dexter. Curious, what do you think of the new season? Does it live up to what you were hoping for, or do you wish they'd have left it alone? Laura in Phoenix. And Laura, I tell you, I'd like it. I like it a whole lot. And for a second, let's talk about the three new so I can be specific here. The three new seasons of Dexter past the Miami version of Dexter. You have one called, I think it's New Blood. It takes place in Iron Lake. Cold, snowy, you know the one I'm talking about. That one I thought was okay. I was really excited to have Dexter back, but the series was just it was all right. Then there's the one that rewinds, takes place in Miami when Dexter's college age, getting out of college, and he becomes the serial killer that he is later on in life. Sort of his origin story, and it's all new actors playing the characters. And that one is also okay to me. It's interesting to see all that stuff, but I think it could have been better. And now the new season, the newest series, I guess it's called Resurrection, takes place in New York. Dexter's back. I think it's fantastic. Even though it's not in Miami, and I love the fact that it's set in Miami. That's a cool setting, I think, for that series. Even though it's in New York City, that same vibe is there, the whole Dexter vibe. That vibe was off, I think, before, and now it's back. It feels the same. It feels like the same Dexter. So that's a long way to answer your question. I do really like it. So Laura, thank you for your question. I know you didn't expect that lengthy answer, but I'm pretty excited about Dexter. All right, that's going to do it. That is your episode for today. Again, thank you so much for listening to 10 Minute Murder. See you next time.